Hey, what's up,
Hey,
fellas?
hey.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Man, we finally got us all on here. It's been a crazy
Wow.
couple of weeks,
One of
hasn't it,
these
man?
screens is not like the other. What, Brian? What in tarnation is going on with your backdrop?
It's no. It's Brian, and then do you see Castle Hives, eh?
Uh huh. Canadian edition. Okay.
See? See? Mm-hmm.
Where'd you get that flag, Brian?
So this past weekend I took a trip down to Mr. Burns's place, and Jason Crook was there. And we after and it was an amazing day of you know checking out the bees, and just I guess more important, it was just the fellowship. It was just an awesome day. And we go and we have dinner, and as I'm walking over to my car, I hear, Brian, here, come here. So I walk over, and it's Jason. He goes, here, take this. So I have been loaned, you know Ian Stepler's Canadian flag. So I've got a. I figure, I don't know. I'll probably use it once or twice, and then mail it back to Jason. So
All right. Well, that sounds fun.
yeah, there he is right
Man,
there.
pretty cool. Who, Ian? Or
No,
Jason?
there's
Jason,
there's
Jason.
Jason.
Hey,
Yeah.
Jason. Hey, Jason. Hey, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Stream Team Chat. We've got all three of us on here. It's been a crazy few weeks here, but we appreciate y'all hanging with us and checking in tonight. And Greg and Brian, it's great to see you guys again. So tonight we'd like to just kind of take a few minutes to, I guess our whole chat, to talk about summertime beekeeping. Obviously, we're right in the middle of summer, and in different parts of the country, we've got different things going on. So before we get rolling on the topic, why don't you guys tell us what's going on with you? Greg, why don't we start with you? How are things going up there in the Appalachian Mountains of Ohio? I think that's what it is, right?
We're in the foothills. We're the probably the one of the furthest counties west that's considered a part of the Appalachian mountain range. So we're in the foothills. All of a sudden, you're heading east out of Columbus, Ohio, and then all of a sudden it feels like, did you fall asleep and wake up somewhere else on the interstate? Because all of a sudden you start hitting these big hills, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it just out of the blue, just shows up in the woods. There's a lot of aggressive terrain change, and that works out for us being where we're at. Because it's the not a lot of the ground is row croppable. It's hardly tillable. It's at the very top of ridges, a lot of heavy clay and things like that. But what that actually ends up being nice is for and other ecological opportunities. So for us, it's a little slice of heaven where we get that feeling of being high on top of a ridge, looking. There's a place on the farm where we can look out, and I don't know, the sky drops off. We can't see that far, but it's at least probably 3 to 4 miles straight across. So it's pretty. So it's a neat little place to build up a bee business and raise queens and raise bees. I've had a lot of fun in showing some folks that. And when Grammy was out, Lisa, um, midwife, my brain's fried tonight, guys. Grammy's mid, what I'm talking about. Grammy's
Grammy
channel.
midwives.
Lisa was out. Sorry, Lisa,
It's
I
a
butchered
mouthful.
that. Lisa was out, and she got to see a little bit. I think she took a little video of kind of what's important to us and why, and kind of how we've been blessed with this queen breeding scenario as far as the lay of the land. And it's always fun when folks get to come out and we can share a little bit of that with them. We were surprised, here we are, we know the shop's open on weekends, and Brian just texted out of the blue and said, hey, you gonna be at the shop Saturday? And I said, yeah, it's Saturday, Sunday. Learning yards usually every other Saturday. So I thought, well, Brian just must be in a bind for equipment if he's wanting to come down on a non-learning yard day, because usually he comes down for learning yard. So Brian gets there, right, and there's a couple customers coming in and out, and Brian's there, and we're hanging out, and Brian's like, he goes, what would make this better? And I said, what's that? And he goes, donuts. And I said, well, man, if you would have came on a learning yard day, we would have had, coffee and donuts and the whole schmear. And he said, well, if only there was a place, if only way we could get donuts delivered here, wouldn't that be nice? And I was actually thinking, well, I could go send Jake to get you some donuts. I mean, if you really got to have them, we'll get them for you. And then all of a sudden, I heard someone say, did someone say donuts? And in walks Jason Crook with Bohemia Bees coming, bearing gifts of donuts. And so it was a lot of fun.
Awesome.
We spent literally the whole entire day in between customers and putting some nukes together for a fella, and just going out and kind of showing them the lay of the land and kind of what our just our vision of this farm and kind of where we're at with that so far. And we got to see some really cool things. I think I think Brian might have got some video of some things, and I know Jason did.
Yeah.
And then we kind of just topped the day off just the way it should, and just in true Appalachian cuisine. We went to a really fancy meal, which was a really nice double bologna fried sandwich with mustard and onion and mayo and an ice cream sundae. So it was a good time hanging out with friends and just sharing what we do. And just, it's always fun to be able to fellowship and hang out and talk and just kind of build those relationships. So that's kind of the big thing that's been happening. Of course, the following week, I kind of tuned in remotely down from Columbia, Tennessee, where I went down and visited a lot of really fun beekeepers just to kind of hear a little bit more about what they're up to. I was down there for some bee business, so it was cool to be able to break bread and there's a lot of folks. I can't remember all their names, but of course Tim McCandless kind of helped set that up. He was down there. Several of his buddies, Barry Brown, a fellow named Jody. There's a lot of folks. Dick Brickner was down there, so it was pretty cool just to meet Dick and everybody else too. But Craig Midget, a lot of great folks, and a couple. One of the my brain's so fried tonight, so I'm going to try not to just keep rambling on and on and on. But there was a fellow there, and we're friends now on Facebook. I can't think of his name, but it was an honor to meet him because he's a military veteran. Is in the Hives for Heroes program, and it was an honor because he said that one of the first channels that he started checking out and really helped him with his beekeeping was ours, and so that was extremely humbling and quite an honor for someone to want to shake your hand and say thanks for putting out the videos. It's helped me with my beekeeping. So, anyways, that's kind of what's been going on the outside peripheral of the farm. The internal stuff is just. I'm not even ready to get into all that. It's just a bunch of it is to say it's a go time is an understatement. It's just the absolute nitty gritty, ugly blood guts of running a business. And then this time of year, I do want to mention first. I'm gonna James Cobb. That's it, Tim. Yeah, thanks for that. I'm terrible with. I can see his face and his wife's face, but the names. I want to thank a lot of our customers. They've been extremely patient this year, and it's really been a blessing. We got absolutely crippled the first part of the year with weather, and it absolutely set us back. We were hoping only about 2 weeks. It actually ended up setting us back about 4 weeks, in some instances 5 weeks, when we were having queens out for mating, and then the replacement queens and the cell starters all got affected during that one big cold snap. And it's hard to explain how that really sets you back, but some of these things are exponential. When the wrong things strike at the right time, when the queens that are out in the field that are going to be there for nukes, or that you're planning on shipping out in the future, when you are questioning quality at all because of rainy weather for 10 days and mating flights, and we made that choice just to go through and just squish every single one of them out of that round just to be safe. We had the backup plan, which was the cell starter. We had everything it was going to set us back, 16 days, 14. Well, when everything in that cell starter also got chilled and they broke off and totally abandoned all those grafts, all the backup plans for all those grafts that were out to be mated, you just talk about this. Have you guys heard of Murphy's Law?
Oh yeah.
Have you heard of Murphy's bigger, badder brother, which is O'Leary? O'Leary's law makes Murphy's law just look like cake. But that's we got that out of the way first part of the year, and so now we've just been playing catch up. There's nothing we can do. We're working within nature's time lane or time frame and timeline, and we're getting caught up just as fast as we can on queens. But I hate that. I hate that. We can't get everything out as fast as we want to, and we've been saying it over and over again. We're all about the quality over the timelines. So I want to thank everyone who has ordered queens for your patience as we work to get quality queens out, and it means a lot to us. So that's kind of where we're the nitty gritty side of things is just for we make several steps forward, and there's always something. That's beekeeping, that's bee business, and we're just working through that. I'm looking forward to seeing those leaves turn colors and the temperatures cool off and get to that place where we're back to planning again for next year. But anyways, that's enough of me rambling on about the woes of beekeeping in Ohio as a business. But it's been challenging. We're working through it. We're learning a lot. And I just want to say thanks to all the folks who support us. So, Brian, what about you? What's going on up there in your neck of the woods?
Oh man, it's about the same, I think, as everybody. I'm getting down to the wire where I've got to start extracting honey. So that's going to take place, I think, in the next 2 days. Um, I wanted to start. My plan was to start pulling supers yesterday while my wife was at work, and we had a mess that I had to clean up. So I spent 4th of July morning cleaning up a freezer that the door had popped open and everything thawed. So that kind of, that was exactly my look. But yeah, I had some other words to say too. But it's just like getting down to that wire where I think later tonight after the stream, I'm going to drive over and get all my equipment. That way I don't have to drive tomorrow and get it so that I can pull the supers at the farm. Because last I checked over there were 2 supers on each colony were filled, and I added a third. So I need to start pulling supers though, and at least just get some of it off. I think I'm going to end up leaving 1 super on each of those, but I need to check the colonies over at the main apiary. Just I've got so many supers. I've got probably more supers out than what I ever have. And where I think I'm going to get into a little bit of a situation is I know I don't have enough buckets. So what I'm going to have to do is when I pull my supers, stack them up, count them, and then do like a Home Depot run and buy buckets just to store it. And I've been now starting also I'm starting to look at like farmers markets, because I know I'm not going to be able to, you get to a point like in the hobbyist level where if you have 100 or 200 pounds of honey, you can easily word of mouth get rid of it. But I know I'm going to end up in a situation this year where I know by the number of supers I have out there, word of mouth is not going to sell what honey I harvest. So I've been looking at getting like a banner just to do like some farmers markets and things like that. So that'll be interesting because it'll be all new, but I think it'll be fun. Just meeting different people and exposing more people to Castle Hives honey. So, but it'll be fun. So I'm trying to enlist somebody in the family just to come, and when I do like get into the heavy part of the extracting, I want to try and get somebody to come and help me, just because I mean, you guys know when you've got, I think I'll probably have 20 or so boxes to do. When you do it yourself, it's a long day.
Yeah, it can be for sure.
So, but
Sounds
yeah,
like
that's
like good
where I'm
time.
at. Yeah. Yeah. And then after that, it's just going to be, you know, I'll do my washes and I'll probably hit them with a couple rounds of OA. just to get them moving towards the fall, because that's what I'll be thinking of. I mean, I'm already thinking of the fall right now. I think most beekeepers are. So get them into the fall and get them cleaned up and ready for that fall flow. And I mean, then pretty much it's, winter. So,
Yeah,
fun.
good stuff. Well, it sounds like you guys and we're all busy. I know. Just wanted to post this comment. Yehuda says, great to have all three of you together. It is good to be together. It's been a little while since we've been able to have a typical stream team chat, and so it's really good to have.
Yeah.
And a few people have mentioned that, so I thought I'd just post that. And we appreciate everyone who's on here, and for those who have participated, the last few weeks in what we've done or what we haven't done, who still are here and loyal to us, we appreciate you being here tonight. So, the topic tonight, obviously, we're in the middle of summer beekeeping, and it is obviously different depending on where you're at. Down here, we're pretty much towards the end of our honey season, but now we're just beginning for next year, really, is what we're doing. I may pull a few more boxes. It's been a weird flow. Like we had a decent flow. Our early spring flow, I think there was enough of a flow coming in for the bees to sustain themselves and to grow, but they didn't store much of anything. And so we had a decent tallow flow, but then the drought hit us, or a dearth hit us, and so it kind of stopped. And so we got a decent harvest. We got about half of what we got last year all year so far this year. But then after that, a few days later, it seems like the bees just kind of started, they weren't robbing anything. They weren't agitated. They were fairly nice. And so, I put some cappings out down in Slocum, and I don't think they touched them like in a week. And so normally they're just all over it. It's just clean like within a day. And so, I don't know. There's something going on right now, but it's not a big flow. It's kind of a trickle flow. So I may pull a few more supers or a few more frames later in the month. Rusty's going to probably do the same thing and just have a small little harvest, but I probably won't even videotape that. It's not going to be much at all. I don't know if I will or not, but really we're kind of in, let's get ready for next year mode already. I'm trying to plan and prepare for what I want to do. You guys you still have honey coming in. Greg, I know you're still doing the queens, and it sounds like you had to kind of, it's amazing how one weather event or one situation can just kind of change your entire year. It's just amazing how that happens. In a lot of things in life, you can just bounce back and you can work harder and make it up. But with beekeeping, you can't. You can only push the bees so hard, and they can only do what they can do in their situation. And so it's kind of tough. But we had a few questions. Maybe we could comments and questions I wanted to address here real quickly, and then we'll kind of dive into what each of us is kind of doing for our summer stuff. So Steve Amos, he's been a real, since I don't know when he found us, but lately he's been commenting on my videos and watching my videos. And this is a true statement. And we've had 2 or 3 people mention this. Steve mentioned hydration. Keith Spillman said water. And that is so critical. I'm just going to, down here in Alabama, it has been super humid and super hot. And I just, it wasn't too bad. It was kind of, the weather wasn't too bad. It was a little rainy, actually, kind of cloudy the day we harvested and pulled our honey. And but boy, this past weekend, it was extreme. We had a heat index, I think, on Saturday of like 110, 111. Super humid. And then, Friday I was out there trying to do some stuff with the bees, and just, I could only go about a half a day and just literally on the verge of, heat exhaustion, it felt like. And so you got to be careful out there. The bees, we want to work with the bees. We want to be out there in them, and we need to make sure we take care of the bees, but be sure you take care of yourself first. I literally had to just stop and, power through and stop. And I wasn't able to even do everything I needed to do. And so just take care of yourself first. Make sure you have the nutrition you need, the food you need, but most importantly, the hydration you need. That is critical. I know, especially down here in the South, it's super humid, but it's hot everywhere. This time of the year in July, it's Arizona's, hot and it's probably 120 degrees, but it's dry, but it's still hot. Heat is heat. Up there in the north, you guys have the heat as well. So just make sure you take care of yourself physically. Doesn't matter how many bees you have. Doesn't matter how well you take care of your bees. If you don't take care of yourself, you're going to get in trouble. So I thought that would be something we needed to really bring up. And that was the first comment that came up in about about what to do during the summertime. But I'll kind of briefly touch on what I'm doing. Some things I'm a little bit excited about, but a little bit nervous about, and trying to kind of figure out. And I know Greg and Brian, you might have some ideas of how to kind of get through this. Next month or two is going to be critical for me. Right now, I've found, we're starting to see a few hive beetles, but I'm trying to stay on top of that. The bees currently look pretty good, maybe as good as they ever have this time of the year, since I've been trying to run so many colonies. But I have had a few that have kind of crashed on me, but so far they're looking pretty strong. Of course, they can crash in a hurry. We did pull the honey a little bit earlier this year than I did last year. Last year we pulled it 4th of July weekend, and so I would prefer to pull it a little bit earlier, but just haven't been able to. This year we did that. And I am starting to see some evidence of mites and some beetles starting to build up. And so I've got to get on top of that. I'm working on that. But I'm not, as of right now, I'm not planning on doing pollination this year out to California. And so my goal is to just absolutely improve my genetics. And I'm starting on that this month. I'm hoping, Greg, I can get a hold of a few of your queens. If you had a rough year, I don't know if I'll be able to or not, but I'm hoping to be able to sneak a few of those. I have some queens coming from a reputable source, and I right now I can't really say where it's from, but it's they're going to be, I think, some pretty good queens. But I'm gonna the Ozark bees are still too mean. Some of them are pretty nice, but a majority of them, we didn't replace them all last year, Greg, and so there's still a few that are quite angry, to say the least. And so I'm just pretty much going to requeen that whole yard. That's where I want to really emphasize that. The rest of my bee yards are not bad, but that one particular bee yard is just off. I'm not going to say off the chain, but one level down from that, because last year they were off the chain. So Lisa's been up there a couple of times and helped me, and both times they've really gotten after her. The day we harvested, it was rainy and cloudy, and they got after all of us. And I'm just not going to put up with that anymore. We've got to fix that situation. I went up there yesterday, first time I've been up there since we harvested, and they were testing me. Even I didn't do much, and they were testing me a little bit as soon as I started cracking them open. And so we've got to fix that situation up there, and that's my goal. I'm going to order. I'm just going to try and change that out. So hopefully next year I can get into maybe selling some nukes and some queens and things like that, just a little bit on a smaller scale. But that's kind of where I'm at. Honey is pretty much done. So going to try to start feeding them a little bit more, and just trying to work and shift my focus more on bee production a little bit more than just trying to get them all ready for pollination and just get through the winter time. And so maybe we can discuss that a little bit tonight. Greg, I know you've gone through this particular same thing, I think, in a lot of ways, of just kind of trying to shift your whole operation over to bee production operation. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit. Greg, you've already talked a little bit about what you're going through. Any particular strategies or things you're working on right now that might be, that you might want to discuss, or kind of what you're doing this time of the year? I know you mentioned you have a lot, but is there anything that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think this is the time of year where you have to make decisions without prejudice. You have got to be able to get in there and make a cut, thin something out, move it off the stand, move it off a pallet, combine. For me, I've learned that I'd rather make drastic decisions than wait until a little bit too late in the year and roll the dice. Meaning, like today, for instance, we're pulling queens, we're checking up on the last of the nukes to go out, and then the next round of nukes that we're building. And as you're going through and working your hives, I'm not sure if I have the words to explain. I wasn't planning on talking about this. But sometimes when you're out in your bee yard, we can be overly optimistic that if we don't know what we're looking at in that colony, or if it doesn't quite seem right, we think sometimes that there's magic that happens. If we just close the lid and walk away and check on it on a next round through, that it's somehow going to magically fix itself. Now, sometimes you could be talking about a virgin queen who just took a little longer to mate. You could be talking about a lull in available protein and carbohydrates because of some extended period, and it's kind of the bees are just kind of stalling and not going anywhere. At this time of year, if we think about if we take the us out of the equation and we just look to see what the bees are doing, in my mind, the bees really only have 2 cycles. Okay, for me, it's at that winter solstice period when we hit the end of December and January. They're in their building phase, and they're building up for summer, and they're building up to swarm. And then when we hit that summer solstice, it's the opposite. They are slowly starting to pare back down to prepare for wintertime. So for me, if I look at what the bees are doing in just 2 cycles, I can try to understand, well, where does my management fit into what is going on here? What I do in April and May and the first part of June is a little different than what I do right now, where I could let things slide just a little bit, where I could give certain colonies a little bit of leeway to build up, to grow up, to figure it out, especially like when they're on a flow, no problem. But now, at home right now, we what's left in blooming is white clover is on, and in our neck of the woods, it's going to stay in bloom for it hardly does not fade until fall time.
Mm-hmm.
We've got ironweed that's shooting up, and it won't be long before that's blooming. Our main providers are kind of white clover to kind of carry us through. There's various little daisies and asters and things like that are popping up and going through all those phases. So there is some food, but the reason I bring all that up is the fact that when we get past the 4th of July is a cutoff for me, where on Independence Day, I start making different moves to where every decision I make with the colony, if it's looking like it's scrawny, if it's looking like if I pull a queen or I make a nuke out and there's 2 or 3 frames left, for me, I've got no problem going. If I have 5 or 6 colonies that I've just pulled nukes from or queens from, it's no problem. What I like to do is combine all those right now in that moment, take all the boxes off, any extra frames out of the equation, and put those onto colonies who can move that forward faster and further. So the name of the game for me right now is looking at stuff that's kind of fair to midland at best, and just combine, stack them up, and move all the resources that we do have to colonies that are much bigger, much larger, and further along. And what I do is we'll let that cruise, and we'll let those build up with a strength and numbers mentality until we get into October. And when I finally do get into the end of September and then October and even late October, that's when we're actually doing the last of our splits. I know that sounds crazy for a lot of folks. We've said it year after year. At that point in time, we do all of our downsizing splits. So colonies that are in doubles or triples, or God forbid, even more than that, we'll now break them all down. And as we're cleaning up all of our mating nukes and our mating boxes and all those kind of things, we're moving fresh, beautiful queens into all those splits. Then we're going into the wintertime with heavy on numbers and population that by and large, at a minimum, are singles, story and a halves, and some doubles. So rather than what I'm doing now, this time of year, is rather than split everything out to kingdom come, I'm consolidating a lot of those colonies, letting them build up safely and conservatively with a lot less risk, and then let them build up, and then I can actually have a real picture of what that asset is, and then I can bust them back down. Well, we've talked about that a lot with solstice queens and how valuable they actually are. We're not doing 1 frame splits with a solstice queen this time of year. We're just not. The absolute minimum split that we're making right now is going to be a 3 frame split. And that 3 frame split really is just a mating nuke. And that gets to be on the larger side. And that helps alleviate problems with hive beetles, robbing, things like that. So I guess to sum that up, Bruce, right now, the mode of operation that we find ourselves in is risk management, and just trying to get a whole out ahead of any potential loss that we might have by being too risky, because we've spent way too many years. The old saying, a cup of bees and a queen cell is all you need. That's 100% true, but you don't dare do that in July in Ohio. It's a different ball game when we get to this point. The heat is on, the humidity is up. Brian he's gallivanting with that Canadian flag in the background there. And we've been dealing with all this smoke and all this nonsense here that I do actually think has been affecting the temperaments of the bees. It's affected my temperament. When we're out pulling queens with this smoky, hazy sky, you just can't see into the cells right. Everything has this weird light, and you can't look into the cells. You can't see things right, which is frustrating and annoying. And so to me, it's like, well, I wonder how that's affecting the bees' ability to know where the sun is, communicate with that back and forth. I'm not sure that it's affecting necessarily their respiratory system, but anyways, I'm just going to keep rambling because I'm exhausted. And what you said earlier, Bruce, about water, I usually drink a gallon of water a day minimum, and I'm fine. I didn't drink anything literally all day. I had like 1 or 2 bottles of water, and that's it. I'm struggling here mentally, so that's kind of our strategy right now, Bruce, is risk management, get things into the right sizes now, try to run a tight ship as we get into the heat, as we get into dearth, and then make all of our last big moves towards the end of the year.
Brian, what do you think, man?
I try not to think much. I am excited this year, and I saw a question in regards to this, but the solstice queens, this will be my first year where I'm going to requeen after the solstice. So I'm excited just to see how it all plays out, because we'll be like right now, we'll get into an area, like Greg said, we still have a little bit out there and it's enough to sustain them. But before we get into like any bit of our heavier fall flow, those queens will get in there and get established, and those colonies will just start ramping up. And I mean, they'll go gangbusters then into the fall flow and just building out their populations to get set for the winter. So I'm excited to get those. And everybody, I know I already saw like a hashtag Brian50 in that, but I am sitting right now at 17 because I combined a couple. I sold 2 and combined back resource hives that I had. I mean, why not? You don't have a queen, so just combine it back. But Greg, I think I got 10 of those coming from you. So I've got, the 3 queens from Corey that I actually have let those go. I haven't, I know they were in there, they were laying. And I thought, what more do I need to do? I mean, I know the queens are in there, so I'll be curious to see how those are doing, but it's going to get exciting here. It is. I mean, just the honey harvest, and when I get those queens from Mr. Burns there, it's this year's going to be something. It is. So,
awesome. Well, I'd like to address a couple things here real quick. We've got some super chats, super stickers. Appreciate it. I hope I don't forget everybody. I think Brian, you sent one, didn't you? We had.
I did.
If I forget you, apologize. But Bruce from Southern Sass Apiaries, appreciate it, Bruce. We got
Yasmin.
Yeah, where's Yasmin's? Yasmin, I wonder. That was a different currency. I didn't recognize that currency. Did you guys recognize that currency?
Yasmin's from Sweden.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I looked that up, and that's awesome. Yeah.
We got Jason from Bohemian Bees. Appreciate you guys. But I wanted to kind of maybe move into this topic right here. Steve asked this question, and Greg, you would probably be the pro to talk about this a little bit more. I know we've talked about it on the stream team before, but for maybe those who are new or just as a review, a lot of people seem to requeen post flow. How do you guys do that? And how long before you introduce the new queen, et cetera? So that is a great question, Steve. I appreciate it. And I was actually going to address this with Greg here during this chat, and that kind of stirred my brain to ask it now. One of my concerns about requeening here in Alabama post solstice during July, and Greg, I know you went through this a little bit with me last summer, is this year the bees overall are actually stronger here. They look overall better. I've got a few that are weak I need to do something about, but you got these great big hives. You mentioned a little bit about it earlier, Greg. I know, Brian, you've got some strong colonies. I want to show a picture of a couple of Brian Lee's colonies if I can figure out how to pull them up here in a minute. But so this is what I'm looking at, Greg. I'm going out to the bee yard, especially up in Ozark, where they're a little bit feisty, and I want to requeen a majority of those colonies, if not all of them. Between now, probably in the next month or two. It's hot. It's humid. The flow is about to be over. We're about to be in a dearth. And so it's a difficult time for the bees. You already mentioned making your splits a little bit bigger. But say I've got a double stack box, full of bees, just pulled the honey off of them. They're bearding. The whole front of the hive is covered in bees. And I want to requeen those suckers. What would you recommend the best thing to do is? And how would you do that? Steve asked here how you do it after the flow. So that's a great that's a great time to address this topic, I think. So, Greg, what do you think about that? When the bees are just not happy, the beekeeper's not really loving it, it's just a difficult time of year, how do you requeen?
Well, I think if you look at where the challenge is with requeening is typically you get populations that can be too big. It can be challenging to introduce new queens, primarily because of the grumpy field force, it seems, especially in those kind of conditions. For me, I think you have to look at the unit. You have to look at it at the asset. You have to look at it as, okay, what are my goals for this at this point in time? If you're looking at this is just this, some folks are probably going to just flip their lid when I say this, but it's okay. I look at these colonies as a unit, and I'm trying to forecast what growth or what is their greatest potential for a yield. If we're talking about post flow, if you are running bees for honey production, it's fair to say that the greatest potential yield for those bees at that point in time you just captured, which is the honey. Now you need colonies. You need that colony. For the most part, you may decide to do a later season split, so you can go into the winter with double units coming out of the spring. Now you have double the opportunities to capture honey again. If that's the approach, I think that this conversation looks like one thing. However, if you're in a situation and you have doubles and you just pulled your honey off of, and you really don't know what your approach is, if you don't look at your colony as a unit or an asset, and you're trying to squeeze every last bit of yield out of them, you might be a little bit apprehensive to do this. But for me, I've grown with my beekeeping to be able to make decisions and then be so happy with it that I don't second guess it and I walk away and everything's good. For me, in those situations like this, like that, right here, what we're looking at, if you're just tuning in on audio only, what I'm looking at, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, is but I see double deeps with 2 supers over each.
Yeah, these are Brian Lee's hives up in Birmingham. He just harvested, I think, about a week ago, this past weekend, or 4 or 5 days ago anyway. And that's what he's doing. He sent me these pictures. I think these are from today. And I've got some that look a lot like this. Mine aren't typically this big still, but a lot of mine are bearding like this. And so if you want to requeen some colonies like that, what do you do?
Oh man. So when I see that, I have to hold myself back. All right. So if in that scenario, looking at it as a unit, we'd have to ask Brian, and maybe Brian, if he's listening tonight, chime in there what his goals for these colonies would be. And I ask that because a lot of us are in constant growth mode, and we're trying to figure out how can we grow more colonies to produce more yield, whether it's more bees or more honey. In this situation, here's exactly what I would do, and I wouldn't even think twice about it. I would go into each colony. You could either take the time to find a queen, or you could put an excluder right between both doubles, deeps, and then come back in 5 days and know exactly where your queen is or isn't. What I would do with this is I wouldn't split them to kingdom come, but what I would do is that each individual unit would now be 3 assets. I would take the old queen. I would take a small support staff, maybe 2 or 3 frames of brood, and I'd leave them in a nuke box or a let's see. Yeah. So Brian, before I get going, Brian says, yes, a few hours ago, the medium supers are empty. Okay. All right. So the medium supers are empty. That's a different scenario. For scenario one would be, I would actually make 2 splits off of this. I would create nearly 2 10-frame singles with supers, and I would move those to a completely new location, new bottom, new top, right there in the yard. Reason number one is I want to lose the field force. That field force can go back home to Mama Queen and everyone's fine. They're not a big deal. But we're going to humble them and we're going to cripple that initial growth and keep them cut down to about a 10-frame single, knowing we still have several months of the season left. That individual single can 100% grow into possibly another double even that year, or at a minimum be a story and a half going into the wintertime. Meanwhile, off to one side or the other, we've taken all the rest of those resources and created 2 more colonies of similar strength, but without the field force. That's when you come in with mated queens that you already pre-ordered. Let them go queenless for 7 days. Go in, cut all chance of a queen out, add your mated queens, and now you're taking that one resource, splitting it into 3. Now you have 3 nearly tame colonies to continue to work with, to build up, to grow. If one of them kicks the bucket over the wintertime, you've got 2 coming out of the spring. You're not taking a chance on swarming, a late season swarm. You're not going to worry about so much of their thermal footprint over the wintertime coming out of the spring. So for me, when I see something like that, that's what I would do. I would make 2 queenless splits off of it, and I would add my mated queens 7 days after I've done that. Once I've cut those cells down, this is also an opportunity to go ahead and treat first. Get this colony treated and cleaned up first. If you have any, it's no big deal. You're already planning on making splits and moving things forward too. Then you're requeening after any kind of a queen mortality kind of an issue. That's what, looking at that photo, that's exactly what I would do. If I was in Ohio and that was April, that looks different, because in Ohio in April, I would split the absolute tar out of that colony, and we'd be looking at 2 or 3 frame splits, very lean, and I would keep them fed up, and then I would introduce cells or queens, and then really grow the operation and the outfit quickly. So the name of the game really is knowing what is too lean and what is too heavy of a split this time of year. If you simply just, this is my opinion, so take it what it's worth. If you just go into that colony and you find that queen, and let's just assume she's even a this year queen, she already has some age on her. God forbid if she's a last year's queen, this scenario gets even worse. But I would not likely go in there and find the queen, pinch her, and then add a mated queen into that scenario. There is, looking at the front of those boxes, there is probably 15 or 20 pounds of bees on the fronts of those boxes. And if there's another that on the inside, what I will be this is me personally, I'd be very apprehensive on trying to introduce another mated queen into a large colony like that, and have that go well, because sometimes they just get a little more attitude the larger that they get, and they don't really like you to put them in that situation. But
so Greg, just to clarify, if you're in growth mode, like you discussed, you would pull 2 splits from each of these, or pull 1 split from each?
You're looking at 2 colonies now. You would be looking at 6 colonies after we went in and manipulated them.
So what would you do for the queen? You leave her home and you take 2 queenless splits away. That makes sense to get rid of that field force. Yep. How would you just shake them all down in the first box, make sure she's down below and put an excluder on and let them come back up? Or how would you make sure she's in that bottom box?
The easiest thing to do is not even worry about it. Just put a queen excluder between the 2 boxes, come back 5 days later, see who's making cells, and then you know which box to dig through. And at a minimum, you can make a conservative split and just move 1 deep to a new spot, leave 1 deep there, and you're gonna lose the field force from 1. Yeah. You could go ahead and make that split and then go digging, because one of them's going to have it, one of them's not. If possible, I would shake them. If there's so many bees there, trying to shake that out over an excluder as a funnel in a shaker box, you're just asking for it.
Yeah, man. Especially as agitated as they are this time of the year, that
Yeah,
would be rough.
you're gonna pay for it. I would,
Okay.
it's weird because I love and value queens tremendously, obviously. Like a lot of exciting things to talk to you guys about what we're doing with our queen breeding program this year and next year. That being said, in a situation like this, if for honey production, I love the queen. I appreciate the queen. I respect what she's done for that colony. But on the other hand, I've got no reservations taking drastic measures to move that greater colony as a whole into a much better direction
Sure.
for the future. So if that means shaking them out and we don't know where the queen's at and that's okay, splitting them out and letting them going back 5 days later and just checking the boxes and seeing where she is. For me, the most ideal situation is to leave the old queen in that place, move as much of everything else out as possible to new locations, lose the field force in those splits, and then just know that when we are leaving mama behind, if we only leave her with like a sheet of brood and everything else is field force, we're going to lose all that field force within 14 days. As everything else is coming back up and hatching and growing up, we're also going to change the overall demeanor and behavior of that colony is going to smooth out tremendously too. At that point in time, you could also go in there and pinch and replace you. That
Yeah.
field force has timed out. So there's a lot of ways you could do that.
Yeah, I've got a lot that looks similar to this. Brian has a follow-up question, and this maybe work more with Brian Coper, Castle Hives guy here,
Brian, what
part of the
would you
stream
do?
team. So, but Brian Lee says, what if you're not trying to grow? So if you're more in a situation to where you're fine with your numbers, you got colonies like this, would you leave them alone? What if you have one, for example, like in my case, I've got colonies that look just like this, especially since those top 2 boxes aren't full, and I just want to requeen them. I want to get those because they're nasty. I want to get the nasty genetics out of there. So, how would you replace a queen? What would you do about that? And then Brian also, how would you handle the situation? Were you just going to leave these alone, or are you going to try to requeen, or what are you going to do for honey production going into the next year?
So Brian, I saw a comment from him, and he said these are this season's queens. So I think they're only, what did he say, March, April queens. So they're only 4 months old now.
Yeah, they're really good queens. He's excited about them.
And he said he's not really trying to expand, much more. So that's more in like my realm. The only thing that I would do is if all the colonies are strong, I would just let it go. That's me.
Yeah.
Now Greg is sitting there like, oh, he's just seeing these numbers flash, but I mean, you could supplement into other colonies. If you have colonies that aren't quite built out yet, you could supplement those.
Kind of equalize a little bit.
Yeah, equalize out. But if they're all strong, man, wow.
Yeah, that's one thing about that Greg you made a great point about the fact that field force right there, those bees, they're hanging out on the front porch probably because the hive is peaked. You've pulled some honey off, I think, on those, so there's not as much work for them to do, and it's awfully hot and humid. And so what I find in my colonies that look like this time of the year here in Alabama is you think that the inside is going to be full of bees, and it has a lot of bees, but lots of times they're hanging out on the front porch trying to regulate temperature, especially with the humidity down here. So I'm sure it's full of bees, but I'm sure also there's a lot of the foragers may all be on the front porch right there. And so, but Greg, you made a great point that within a couple or 3 weeks, those bees are all going to they've met their maker. They're going to be gone anyway. Mm-hmm. And I think it becomes much more manageable, even if you move the whole hive a little ways away and the foragers, then the hive is going to be nicer. I think Bob Benny uses that technique a little bit where he'll have a feisty hive and he moves them, and it's a lot easier to find everything and to work the colony. But yeah, in my past, I've pretty much left stuff like this alone because I have been a large focus on honey production, and I have had some of these that have done really well, on into the next year. But I've also had colonies that look just like this that crash on me, either late summer. Of course, with a brand new queen, they're probably going to push on through and do something for you maybe in the spring. I guess, Brian, you could assess then and see if you need to replace the queen before the flow hits. That's something you could do with them. But my next question for you, Greg, before we move on past this particular situation is, in my situation, I've got, what if I just had a colony like this, a big colony, and for example, I've moved the hives out of my backyard because my grandchild is here right now, and I just wanted to make sure he doesn't get lit up with bees. And so, let's say Brian's situation, Brian lives kind of in a community there. These are not too far from his house. And those bees, just say, I think they're actually pretty nice bees, but just say they're mean bees or they're angry or their attitude isn't right. What would you do about that situation if you wanted to replace the queen in something like this? Is that going to be a risky endeavor? Or, I mean, how would you do that if you didn't really want to grow, but you need to replace that queen?
That's a tough question, because if we think that through, well, why do we need to replace the queen? In this situation, if we've got a colony that's in doubles, he's got empty supers on. I don't know if that's because he just spun them out or they're building it up. But if a colony is that successful so far, I don't know why we would be requeening, other than we have an attitude problem with the colony. If we have an attitude problem with the colony, is it because of what? Are they hot? Is it humid? Is it pests? Is it a queen issue, or is it a genetic issue? All those things are really hard to kind of read into. Looks like Brian Lee, he comments here, definitely planning on requeening before my wife goes after them with a flamethrower. They are spicy, but great honey producers. What's interesting is I've got to say this, but we've all heard the argument that mean bees make more honey, and no matter which way you are on the fence about it, there was a great Steve Tabor in Breeding Super Bees kind of spoke to that briefly. That through all these trials and testing, they actually found that doesn't hold water. So if you are hanging on to spicy colonies because you think that they make more honey, maybe they do, but maybe they don't. We have a zero tolerance with anything spicy. And when you look at why is a colony spicy, sometimes it can actually just be the queen's attitude, and everybody else is feeding off of that. Just like if mom or dad's having a bad day, if we're not careful with our words and our actions, that translates to everybody else, and then not everybody else is grumpy and short with each other, and on and on and on. Right? In that situation, we remove the queen out of the situation and requeen, and things are better. However, there are some lines that just seem to be spicy no matter what you do, and I think Bruce has spoke to that with his initial foundation stock being swarms and maybe some feral colonies, maybe tended to be a little bit more spicy. Requeening that's not going to fix that unless you wait 45 days and have new brood from a new line that may come into play. So all that being said, in this situation here, he's got a colony with fresh queens that are mega producers, but that are spicy. And if it's not because of mite loads, if it's not because of external pressure, if it's not because of high temps and humidity and being unhappy, and it is something genetically or the queen, well, then you have to just roll the dice with it. But here's where this goes south in a hurry. You have a colony like this, and you believe it to be a queen issue, and it's one of the first knee-jerk reactions is to dispatch the queen, and then introduce a new queen. And then I'll get a phone call from somebody, and they'll say, I don't know what's going on here. I pinched the queen. I let them make queen cells. 7 days later, we added the queen, and they are bawling. They are almost bawling her right through the cage. We removed the cage and put it back a couple of days later. They were fine. And then they let the queen out just to kill her. Sometimes they'll let the queen out to let her lay a couple eggs, and then they'll kill her and supersede her. There's a lot of things that I don't think quite fully understand about the dynamics of a colony when they get to a certain size. And so it can be extremely, in my mind, risky trying to requeen something that's too big. So in my opinion, at a minimum, Brian, what I would consider doing is relocating that colony in the yard. Just move it. Okay. And if you want to put a catch box for the field force and a couple frames of comb and let them just try to revert back, draw out some comb, maybe store some honey for a short time, then maybe do that. But I would be, if we look at that unit and understand where it, and I'll ask Bruce and Brian, I'll ask you this question. When you look at those two colonies there, when you look at that as a unit or an asset, where do you find that it has its greatest worth? Like right now, what is the greatest worth within that colony?
It depends on what your goals are. I would say production, honey production, maybe.
Yeah.
But if the honey production's over, then making bees. I mean, you could make splits, you could make more bees, and so to me, those are the two things that these colonies would both be very effective at.
If we're not making honey with these colonies because we're past our flow, and yet we don't want any more colonies. If we look inside of the colony and they've got protein stored, they've got carbohydrates stored, what I would personally do is I would humble that colony just by moving it and just shake the field force completely. Lose as much of that field force as you can. I think that's going to humble them, may even cool or calm them down, but then it's going to put you into a situation where if you do have to now go in there and requeen, you've eliminated 50 to 70% of the threat of killing that new queen.
Okay. That all makes sense because I'm going to be doing some of this. I have some colonies that look very similar to this right now. So,
Brian, I wonder though also, Brian, do you run any just resource colonies? And I wonder, like, because you're not really wanting to expand much, but it never hurts to set up some resource hives, pull splits off of those and fill up a resource hive. Extra queens never hurts, and you can, I mean, those resource hives that are 4-frame setups, you could pull 2 frames out of each of those, go at it conservative. And then you're just setting yourself up so you have extra queens and you've got brood factories so that when you do need to equalize, I mean, you're set.
Yeah.
You can't raise bees and not have this problem because if you raise your bees and you are maintaining the asset, it is going to grow. It is going to grow to the point to where you have to figure out what in the world are we going to do about this. There is no easy answer because you can't just walk away from, you can. Sometimes doing nothing is something, but only if the plan is let the bees take care of themselves. And in that situation, you could 100% still have a late swarm, and you're going to lose that queen. You're going to lose half the bees, and you're going to maybe have a queen that makes it back from a flight late season. If that happens, is that a net gain or is that a net loss? To me, it's a net loss. I want to be able to control the growth one way or the other. If I want that colony to experience loss, I want to control it. And I want it to be for a very certain reason. So in this situation, no matter what you do, you can't, in my mind, even if you did just requeen them and you interrupt that brood cycle, you're going to interrupt it for what? 7 days, maybe, right? You are still going to have an enormous colony. In my opinion, is way too big for when I would not in Ohio. I would absolutely 100% unequivocal. I would not go into wintertime with double deeps and 2 supers on top. There's just no way.
No.
Yeah, he said, I think he put those supers on a harvest just for them to clean the supers up. I think he's going to take them off. So really, they're double deeps. They're really double deeps.
They're just there kind of in storage, live storage at the moment. Yeah.
But they will brood back. Like if you look at these colonies in a month, they're going to not be this crazy strong, I don't think.
They'll be in doubles in wintertime, it sounds like.
Yeah, I imagine so, or whatever. But, well, hey, that's awesome, guys. Let me Brian, thanks for the picture.
Those look like fantastic colonies.
And Steve, thanks for the question. Let me review Steve's question here and just make sure. Steve sent us a super chat. We appreciate that, Steve. A lot of people seem to requeen post flow. How do you guys do that? How long before you introduce the new queen, et cetera? Greg, I think you hit on that. So let me just follow up with this, Greg, and see if I'm on pat, because I am looking to do this. I want to make sure I do it right. And I've had issues kind of requeening in July and August before. So you feel like do you think the best method is to go ahead and just leave them for a week and let them make cells and then tear those cells down, make sure there's no chance for them to requeen, and then introduce the queen after a week's time? you think that's the best way to do that, or do you want to introduce that queen pretty quickly right after you set up the situation?
At least in my experience, what I see with these bees is we could get by with that prior to solstice. Once we hit that and we're moving towards the other spectrum, everything changes, and you can't get by with quite so much. For me, I would humble those bees to the point where they have no future hope, and then introduce that queen, because they will gladly take whatever you get. Now, the only trick with that, and that's maybe a conversation for a different day, is sometimes the bees are just going to do what they're going to do.
That's right.
And they may let that queen out to spite you, to lay 1 or 2 eggs, to make a queen cell, kill her, and then they want to be in charge of their destiny. I know that sounds ridiculous, but we've had some recent experiences, and we can talk about that a different day. But there is also, I'm gonna, if I might be the world's greatest idiot, and that's okay. I'm gonna throw this out there because I can't. And Brian and Jason Crook, we were talking about that a little bit too. I think that there is also something going on when we are trying to introduce different genetic lines to different genetic lines. I know that's going to sound ridiculous, but I am seeing take rate issues from certain lines that don't exist in the same circumstances with other lines. If we're talking about Italians and Carnies and Caucasians and Russians and Buckfast and all these iterations of Italians, or the different lines like Carney and Caucasian, if all those bees, if the physiological aspect of the bees and the biology of those have some nuance and slight details, even as simple as a longer proboscis, if the biological bee has a difference, how can we not think that the bees also aren't in tune and pick up on any other possible difference, communication, scent, you name it? But I think you also get into situations where, and I don't have the words to put to this, I don't have any research or scientific backing to say this, but I do think that there is something going on, that there is difficulty introducing different genetic lines that can happen. And if you are in a situation where the colony is already a little bit aggravated or a little grumpy or a little bit headstrong late in the season, I think you may see some of those things exasperate just a little bit. But if he with the super chat question, I know we covered that in one of the stream teams. It was actually on our channel, maybe a month or 2 months ago, on queen introduction. And so rather than me go on long-winded about all that, check out that video, because we go into detail about a lot of these different little nuances with introduction and timing.
That's right. And Russell, actually, follow-up question was exactly that. Is there, does the, I guess, the classification of bees, the breed of bees, make a difference? And you addressed that already. So thanks for the question, everybody. Man, we could just, golly, we're already more than an hour in. Holy cat, crud.
When I make it to these things, I just keep talking and talking. I'm gonna make this run late.
No, it's been some solid gold stuff. Jason, this is something that, this is a good question from Jason. Bruce, did you ever consider relocating the mean colonies to new locations, see if that helps? There could be something to that. I just, I got 35 colonies sitting there. It's hard to just relocate them all, but I think I've had kind of feisty bees in each location, and as I've kind of changed the genetics around a little bit, it seems like they're starting to get better. So I think that very well could have something to do with it, because in certain locations the flows are a little bit different, and so that could have something to do with it. There might be a pest, some sort of the Ozark bees are basically in the woods there might be some kind of a pest that's bothering them. I don't know, at nighttime when I'm not there. So that would be a possibility, Jason. But I do think that I'm definitely I just want to get better control of the genetics. And I think by introducing hopefully some of Greg's queens and some of these other queens I'm looking at that are specifically bred for gentle genetics, I think I'm going to have a good situation here. So I'm hoping I'm working at it. I'm working hard on it, because, I can deal with the angry bees. But yesterday I was up there, and yesterday wasn't horribly hot here. It wasn't as bad as it has been, quiet. But I went up there. The bees were calm. They were hanging out on the front of the colonies, and I'm gonna put out a short video on that before too long. But man, I started cracking those lids, and they just, it just became they weren't all that way, but a couple of them were. And I didn't get in all of them. I just kind of randomly got into them. But when I started, what I was doing is trying to go through and replace we had taken some deep frames out of the breed boxes to help open up to keep them from getting plugged up. And it had been about 2.5 weeks, and they did not want to be bothered. And so I had to scrape some comb off, or they started building comb. And I didn't go through all of them because I just didn't feel like it and didn't have the time and didn't want to do that. But we'll find out. We're gonna try some different things and see what happens. Oh man, hey, here's a great question. I think a couple quick questions. How do you store your honey supers? Why don't you guys address it? I have a video. My next video that's going to come out probably in the next couple of days is going to be on that very topic. How I store mine. I use I use ice crystals. Basically the generic version of Paramoth is what I use. I've done it for years and it works well, but I'll have a video coming out. That's my next. I've been hesitant over the years to produce a video on this. Number one, by the time I store my supers, I'm so tired and hot that I don't want to fool with it, and I don't want to make a video, but this time I'm like, I'm going to do it. And number two, it's so controversial. People are so strange, and kind of some people get weird about that, putting those crystals in the boxes. And so, but that's what I do. I stack them with crystals in a battery fourth box. And, by the time within a few weeks, actually those crystals have dissolved or evaporated. And, last year I just left them alone, didn't even retreat them. And I have very minimal moth damage. Ideally you'd retreat them, maybe in a couple of months. And then in the cold winter months, I don't think there's as much of a problem with them. So that's kind of what I do, but I'm going to have a video where I actually show myself doing it. Brian, how do you store your honey supers in the wintertime?
Same as you.
Okay.
Yep.
Greg, I know you're basically, based on bee production, but you do have to store comb, and you do have some honey supers plus other comb. How do you store your comb?
Probably not the way I'd recommend anybody do it, but it works for me. And that is whatever is not on a colony with bucket feeders to backfill for winter storage. Whatever is left over literally is as simple as going onto a skid, shrink wrapping it, and going into the barn. And that's it. This year, when it was time to throw supers on, I go to the barn and go to the skids of supers, pull them out, throw them on, and they go to town. I think if I was trying to be more responsible with that asset, because that's kind of, in my mind, a little bit neglectful, but it was a matter of time. We are always so time poor, it seems. If I'm this year, for instance, we are not in, like we mentioned before, we don't produce a lot of honey, not because we don't have a lot of bees. It's just that it's going back to bees. This year, it's just been such an enormous flow that like we are going to actually have to spin honey off the colonies. And so what I would like to be able to do is to just either dunk or spray them in Zentari or some kind of a BT just to get that on the comb to prevent or at least to start eating at any wax moth eggs if they produce it. So that would be the more natural way if I were to actually do something rather than it's just too big of a. I mean, I got lucky. You put a skid of 90 supers or whatever, and you shrink wrap them and put them in the barn. That could go either way. A mouse could totally get up in there and just wreak havoc. Anything else can't do. So
yeah, I think that the wax moths are going more after the I guess the proteins and the brood areas, and so if you have strictly honeycomb, and especially, I mean, if I could, I'd rather just store it kind of under a pole barn or something open to the air and the light, and that keeps the wax moths out pretty good, especially if it's just honeycomb, if it doesn't have any brood in it. But boy, if they get in that brood, man, they'll just totally tear it up. If you ever want to clean your frames off, just let the wax moths have it. They'll clean it perfectly clean. You just spray it off and you can relax.
Under roof. We've done that too for years, and that was more of a matter of had nowhere another place to put it. If you leave it outside, however, stacked up with no lids on it, that works.
Yeah.
Actually works really well, but it all gets rained in. And then that wax is so white and brittle when you go to put it on. I don't know if it's helping them or hurting them in the springtime, but if you can put it away and keep the critters out, boy, is that beautiful stuff just to put on those colonies and move
It
them
sure
forward.
is, and it works with the paramoth, and it's. I mean, you can't even you really can't even smell it when you pull the lids off. It's good. It's good to let them air out a little bit, but it gases off pretty quickly, and if you kind of seal the boxes up, it works well. So, anyway, that was a great question. And I wanted to hit another question here real quick. Also, let's see. We've talked about that. Let's see. Grayson had a question. Let's see. Oh, this is a really good question, and this is a problem a lot of people are going to start having right now as the dearth hits in the summertime. In some areas, there may not be much of a dearth, but down here, we are just on this between now and if you're close to cotton, it's going to be pretty good between now and the fall flow. But in some, we're about to hit a dearth. So Grayson from Wildwoods Honeybee Farm says, "Hey guys, quick question for y'all. What are some tips that each of you guys would give to help your hives from being robbed from other hives?" And he says, "I still haven't forgot about hashtag Brian50." So anyway, what robbing? How do you in the summertime during dearth times when these colonies are big and strong, like the pictures we had before? Colonies are just they don't have a lot to do. The foragers are just kind of bored and they start testing each other. How do you prevent robbing?
I have only ever run into robbing once in my apiary. And it was when I was, monkeying around and I was doing inspections and there was absolutely no flow and opening up colonies, and I just shut them up. I just closed everything up, reduced their entrances down. I've got I have those plastic like mouse guard entrance reducers on a couple of my colonies and then the apimays. So I just close them up. But I've never run into like a bad problem. I've seen others where literally they'll just their colonies will just get decimated. But knock on wood, I've never had to deal with that in my area. So
Greg, you've got so many bees. I know it can become an issue. I know some breeds of bees are more robbing prone. I believe Italians are pretty bad about it. I don't know that Carnies are as bad about it. I'm not sure about Caucasians, but what do you do to help prevent that in an area where you have so many bees with them flying distance of each other, those big strong colonies? What do you do?
Good question, Bruce. And you what you said there is kind of case in point. Italians, we don't have any Italians here at all, other than whatever is you can't whatever you do, you can't escape that. There's going to be a percentage of Italian in your lines, no matter what you do. That being said, we don't have any pure Italians or dominant Italians here at all. But in the past, Italians were the ones that were just, they were more prone to do that ferociously. With the Carnies and Caucasians, the Caucasians specifically, they're a little more content in their environment as long as they've got enough. That sounds counterintuitive, but if you have colonies that are starving out, this is a very long conversation, but the short answer to this, Bruce, is if you think about why are colonies robbing, in my mind, right or wrong, colonies rob for two reasons. There is the idle hands or the devil's playground scenario where colonies with nothing to do and no flow and a high field force, they're going to want to go gather. It's in their nature, right? That is one aspect, and that can be a problem, but that is nowhere near as dangerous as when you have colonies who don't have any food at home and have nothing to do, because that's when you start getting into the apocalyptic robbing in those bee yards, and that can be a really big problem. What we tend to do is we will switch up the feeding mechanisms too. We go from early in the year, we might put bucket feeders on, we might switch to end frame feeders, and then as we are migrating out of that, I'm careful not to put too much feed inside of a colony in a frame feeder, because that is, to me, is a buffet. If robbers, or they're testing it and we find out, or they find out that you have a gallon of open feed inside of a colony, to me that can be a little bit problematic. So what we do is we switch to bucket feeders, and we're just trickling the feed on, keeping that stimulative feeding effect on each colony. And I think that's the big thing in helping these colonies feel like there is still something coming in, which in my, at least, is it helps to curb that, we have nothing to eat, nothing is coming in, let's go to war. So by trickle feeding the colonies, keeping everybody fed up, even just lightly, I think that really helps to cut down how much robbing. Bruce, what do you do in your neck of the woods about robbing and trying to curtail some of that?
I think a real important thing is to just have strong colonies. You know, that's one thing you mentioned earlier. When you make your splits, make sure they got plenty of bees in there. You know, don't just do one frame splits or two frame splits in this time, during this time of the year. So I think that's important. That's the main thing I've done. I've also done some like open feeding with the feeders a ways away. That way the bees feel like, they're having to go get some more. They got something to do. They're having to go get it. But the problem is during a dearth, they'll suck that stuff down so fast. And the truth is that the stronger colonies they'll benefit greatly, and the weaker colonies won't benefit. They won't be able to get, participate much in that. And so if you can be more intentional about how you feed, that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out now. If I'm trying to introduce these new queens and I'm trying to grow and, make some splits here soon and change the genetics, I feel like if the bees if they have food, if they're happy, they'll be more likely to accept those queens,
100%.
but I've got some in-frame feeders I've ordered. But I am concerned about that too. If I'm making a split and they've got 4 or 5 frames of bees, and then you got these other colonies that are much bigger, I don't know. That's what I'm going to have to figure out exactly what I want to do. I'm going to be trying some things. I'm going to be trying some new things I haven't done before, because I've never made a big change this time at this late in the year before. Usually I do it, in the early spring is when I make my big changes. But I hope if I can figure out this summer thing, I'm thinking in the long run it'll be better for me, because the post-solstice queens and the post-solstice hives do really well the next year. So I'm hoping I can figure out how to do it properly here, so I can have stronger bees coming into the spring. But yeah, I'm trying to figure all that out right now. But what I've done in the past is just kind of let them, maybe open feed them like once a month or twice a month. But the key is strong colonies, because if they start to get robbed, they'll just defend themselves, and it works out pretty good. I did want to recognize here Connor over in Israel with Brown and Daughters Honey. Thanks for the super chat there, Connor. He talks a little about the comb here, how they got destroyed last winter. This year he put it in a walk-in cooler.
Nice.
Game changer. So that sounds like that's a good deal. But he's from over in Israel. Cool guy. Actually, he's got a YouTube channel. I didn't realize he actually had a channel where he did videos, but I found it last week and watched some of his videos. He does a good job. He hasn't had the channel for very long, I don't think, but it's pretty good stuff. See what they're doing over there in Israel. And he's a physician, so he's a smart guy, and he's got some pretty neat thoughts in what he's trying to do over there. So if you get a chance, check out his channel. That's Brown and Daughters Honey. He is actually in Israel, so it's pretty unique and pretty cool. He is from Louisiana, I believe, though. So he's an American guy that's over there. He's married, has at least 1 or 2 children, and just a great, seems like a great guy. Grammy, appreciate the super chat. Mrs. Thanks for the chat with a ton of good information, and glad to see us back together.
Have we all been gone that long?
It's been 4 weeks since we were all. It's been 4. I think it's been 4 weeks since we were all on here together.
Mate.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we filled in the gaps. We took 1 week off, and then I came in on the next week. And then last week, Brian and I, you checked in with us. So, but it's been a while since we've done a traditional stream team chat. So it is good to be back together again doing this. So JC Apiary talked about what we could try for queen indirect. We've talked about that a little bit earlier in the chat, JC, if you checked in a little bit late. He said he tried 2 days queenless, and I tried 6 days queenless. Both killed the queens as soon as they released them. They're now making cells. Man, they just do that sometimes. But what I've seen, Greg, it's interesting, kind of going back to the queen topic a little bit, is that man, I'll get say for example 10 queens from somebody, you know, two or three or even four of them, and they'll just accept them like nothing. They don't even skip a beat. That new queen is out, she's laying. You know, this is the queen that you introduced because she's got the mark on her, and you can just tell, right? And two or three of them, it's like they just don't seem to work out, and then you got three or four that they either are kind of mediocre queens lots of times, or they supersede them and they end up with a queen and she does fine. And so I'm not sure why that is. I think it's later in the year, the more difficult it is to have success. There's got to be a way to do it. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in the chat, JC. We kind of talked about this time of the year. There's a lot of stress on the bees, making sure you wait basically about a week if you can. Greg mentioned probably to make them hopelessly queenless, but make sure also, Greg, you mentioned that when you do this, you need to go through the entire hive and knock down every cell that's in there that those bees have tried to make, because if they have created any emergency cells on their own, they're going to murder that queen as soon as she comes out. There's a pretty good chance of that. So make sure you go back in there and kill any of the new cells. And you did
Make
say
sure you're
here that
shaking the bees off the frames, because you cannot see all the cells
yeah,
if you don't
absolutely.
shake those bees, and you'll think you did everything right.
Yeah, you got to shake them
And
off.
you'll find out later.
There'll be a little queen cell kind of hidden in a corner somewhere up under some drone cells or something that the bees are on, and you think you got it, but you might have some drone cells and a queen cell just sticking right down under there, and you may think it's a drone cell with all the bees on there. Until you shake them off and examine it closely, there's no way you can be sure. So that's great. That's a good thing. So JC, just think about that and make sure they're hopelessly queenless and destroy any queen cells that they've developed. And if they let her out, and if she lays a few eggs and they supersede her, then that's just what they're going to do. Sometimes you can't help it sometimes, but at least you know it's going to be her genetics, you know, if they're hopelessly queenless, you know, and you get all those cells knocked down. Whew, been going an hour and 24 minutes, guys.
I think, Brian, you have to cut out early tonight, about 9:30 or so.
Probably about 5 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Bruce, you have any questions directly targeted for the closet sideliner himself, Brian Coper?
You're crazy.
Oh, not really. I think we got all kind of, like I said, let's see, a lot of folks on here at all of our different levels, probably more of the hobbyists, probably all of our levels. I know I recognize names on here, people doing what we're all doing in their own way, but we did have oh gosh, man, got just a couple more questions. This is kind of a quick one we can answer here. Old saying is 4th of July, let it fly. What do you guys think in Connecticut? Man,
Brian, what do you think?
Go ahead, Brian. Yeah, what do you think, Brian?
So me, and I apologize, the pup seems to want to bark right now. But
that's okay.
Me being the person that I want to try and control the bees that I have in my apiary, I will only take a swarm if it is directly from one of mine. And that's it. So I typically don't mess with swarms. All of the swarms that I've ever captured, they've always been earlier in the season. So, but you know, ones, man, I guess it just depends on the situation, really. You know, if I had, like, you know, if you had a weak colony, you could always combine it, catch them and combine it with another one just to equalize things out. But I'm really not that much of a swarm guy. I don't know why. I'd rather stand in them like I did at Greg's the other day, and you have the cloud buzzing around you, and I'm holding my camera in the air. To me, that's exciting.
Brian, well done. Brian is teasing right before he jumps off and leaves us. He's teasing with rare insight to a swarm, not swarm, but swarm that happened right in front of our eyes.
And I think Grammy is on here. I think Lisa is still on here. I don't know. But
yeah, she is. She just sent a super chat. We appreciate that, Lisa.
One thing I'll say before I take off is Greg Burns has to have the most complex, like, beekeeping, I don't know, whatever, some type of system in his place. And then what he has beekeepers from other areas of the country visiting, he has this little remote, and it's almost like he gets it and he just hits a button and a swarm takes off. Because it happened when Lisa was there, and then Jason and I are there, and he distract us by talking about this hawk, and we're looking in trees, and secretly what he did is he grabbed that remote again and hit a button, and we turn and look again, and there's a cloud of bees going, and that's it. So he has to have the most complex beekeeping remote known to mankind.
Customer service and customer experience, Brian. That's what
It
we're all
is.
about.
It's top
We
notch.
provide all the scenarios just so you can have just photocentric Kodak moments. Did you? We did so much, Brian. Did you get? I can't remember what you got video of or what you were. Was there any video of that occurrence?
While you and Jason were up,
I can't remember. Okay.
when you and Jason were up picking virgins, I was standing down there with my camera just like this, just looking straight up. And I filmed it in slow-mo. That way I want to try and get the sounds and then just slow it up a hair just to see the movement in the air. So
we'll talk more about that next time, and Brian can fill us in and tell the story as he saw it. It was pretty cool, and
it was fun.
Yield off that.
It was fun.
Well, Brian, you better get on and do what you got to do.
Yeah,
I think Greg and I'll hang on.
I hate to.
Final thoughts from the closet sideliner, Brian Goper.
Well, I know I've had a couple people leave comments not on videos. Like a couple people asked, when are you harvesting? And then even tonight I saw a couple comments just about harvesting. I plan on starting the process tomorrow. So look for a video. It'll probably be at some point next week where I'll go through like my entire harvesting. I won't break it up like here I'm pulling my supers and I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do the whole entire process. When I go over, I'm probably going to try and, get some use out of my hive butler. So I do want to show that. Tracy was on here and went through all of the different uses of that. So, I want to include the hive butler into that process, but look for that next week. I'll do the entire pulling the supers, uncapping, spinning it, filtering, and everything that I do with my extraction. So, but awesome. Looking forward to it though.
Yeah, so, speaking of the hive butler, I pulled mine out of the barn yesterday, so I'm going to play around with it some. We'll see what I think. But yeah. Brian, thanks for checking in, man. We'll see if we can close this thing down without you. It's going to be tough. You're our tech guy, so it's going to be hard. But we appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Do it. See you, Brian.
I will. See you, man. I'll talk to you gentlemen next week.
All right.
Bye.
See you, buddy.
Hey, appreciate it, Brian. So we got, JC Apiary. Thanks for the super chat, man. And thanks for the response, gentlemen. They never gave them a chance to lay. So if I'm understanding this right, JC, possibly they had their own queen cells in there already established. And that is a key thing. When you wait to put a queen in there a few days, it is an advantage. If they're hopelessly queenless, man, if they've started some queen cells, you can hang it up. They're going to probably knock those things down. Greg, it's been fun so far. We'll spend a few more minutes here and there's a couple more questions here. Let's see. This is an important one right here. It was early in the chat. I hope he's still on here. Katornik's Corner says, curious as to how common pesticide poisoning is with honeybees. I lost 4 hives in the past 7 days. Not sure if it was a mosquito control issue or if someone sprayed and my bees got into it. Greg, what are your thoughts on the pesticides and the fungicides and all the sides out there?
Well, it's 9:30. I think I've gone on record a bunch with sharing a lot of this, but in short, you've got a couple different scenarios going. As our family row crops in Minnesota, and so this blame game is close to the heart, and a lot of the times it's easy to point at big ag as the violator, and in some ways they are, in some ways that they're not. If we have, for whatever reason, a crop that's being sprayed with a pesticide in July, late July, at a time where our bees have nothing to forage for, and they're getting sprayed at 11 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, our bees are going to go get in that immediately. You know, if we are out in that area and there is nothing else for them to feed on, they're going to go forage and hunt and try to find that. Okay, is that the farmer's fault? Not really. Would it be more ideal if the farmer could spray at a more opportune time for us? Well, sure, but we can't gauge our livelihood versus theirs. So that being said, if we're in scenarios where our bees are starved out or they're hungry, they don't have what they need, and that's why they're roaming so far, well, let's try to mitigate that the best we can. So I'll just leave that on that shelf for now. When you're talking about drifting, however, of a pesticide or a fungicide or an herbicide, all those are going to behave and have a different reaction, I think, with the bees. But if the bees are in direct contact during an overspray or drifting of a chemical, also, if you set your colonies within 40 feet of agriculture that is going to be as part of their integrated pest management is a liquid or a chemical, that's not their fault either. What can you do to help mitigate that to start, I think, is the better question. All that being said, let's say in a situation where your bees are out foraging up to 2 miles and they get into something, who knows what, some kind of a pesticide. You're going to start seeing that the reaction to that quickly, and you'll mostly see that with bees piled up inside the colony. They can be on the landing board, they might be out in front, they may not even make it home. The worst thing, and I can't speak intelligently enough about this, but I think one of the greatest threats is not so much the wet time on the plants as it is once these things are applied to the plants, it dries on the plant, and we get into harvest time and we have dust clouds, or we have that the more of that granular exposure that the bees are going after and then bringing back to the colony as though it is a source of protein. I think that's where we get into some really hairy situations, because it can almost choke the life out of the colony a little bit slower, and it's harder to read into that and see kind of what that situation is. But the original question is, he's curious as to how common pesticide poisoning is with honeybees. I lost 4 hives in the past 7 days. Not sure if it was mosquito control or if someone sprayed and my bees got into it. There's no way to know. For me, in my experience, I don't think I've ever actually experienced that. I can remember very clearly. We've talked about the what's the name of the curve, Bruce? The Dunning-Kruger curve. And you get to that 3rd year, right? And we know so much about bees. We're telling all the veterans who are keeping bees for a living how wrong they're doing everything, because we've got it figured out. And here we are at the top of Mount Stupidness, and then all of a sudden we hit that next winter, and all of a sudden all of our bees are dead, and we're trying to figure it out. Well, I know from my own experience, when we were going down a treatment-free route, and we thought we could rid the bees with mites by using small cell foundation and doing things in a certain way that we were going to eliminate that problem. When all of our bees were dead, it's really hard to point the finger where the just cause is, but you want to point it everywhere else. And as soon as you see a honeybee with its proboscis sticking out, everyone jumps on the bandwagon that, oh, that's pesticide poisoning. That's a neurological reaction. That's why their proboscis is out. That's not true at all. That can happen, but that's not most of the time. That's not actually what we're seeing. So personally, I wanted to blame a situation on it, and it wasn't. And Coturnic's corner situation, clearly they've had loss due to a very short exposure to a pesticide or poison of some sort, and the bees are dead. I don't know how common that really is. We might get, if you get out to maybe Iowa or Nebraska, if you're trying to raise honeybees right in the midst of all these other crops, maybe it's more common there. I guess I don't know, Bruce. How common do you think that it is for you?
Well, like I was saying earlier in the chat, I moved the bees out of my backyard because of just a family situation with a young toddler here. I didn't want to risk him getting stung. Plus, they have a dog, and the dog sounds like he's getting shot every time he gets stung. And so
Oh no,
I just moved all my bees out of the backyard. It's probably for the best anyway.
that's nice.
But
Yeah.
my backyard bees were within about, some of them were within about 30 feet of the road, and they haven't been by. They need to come by with the mosquito trucks this year because mosquitoes can get bad here. But I never had any significant loss. I remember one year they would spray like around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or maybe 5, about the
Mm,
time I got home from work, a little bit later. But it was right when the bees were coming home, and for some reason, the drones, like I would see bees dying in front of the colonies, but it seemed like they were mostly drones. It was kind of bizarre.
mm,
And for a few times I saw that before, but it didn't affect the strength of the colonies at all. I mean, they just pushed right along, and that mosquito truck was right. I mean, literally right next to the hives. So most of the time they would spray in the evening time after dark or right at dusk, and that doesn't seem to affect the bees at all.
right.
But one thing about the pesticide poisoning that I believe that I've seen, I have seen a little cluster of bees here or there that I think were probably poisoned a little bit, just at some of the in various situations. My buddy Davis, we were out at his place one day, and there was just a clump of bees laying on the ground. The hive was alive, but there were a bunch of bees laying in front of the hive dead, his tongue sticking out like what we're talking about. And I had a little bit of it this past year. I'm not sure if it was poisoning or not, but it's just the bees that are out foraging are the ones that are going to die immediately from that. I don't think they come back and they spread the poison throughout the colony and kill the whole colony. I guess it's possible, but I've never seen that. But there was an interesting video that Umberto from Inside the Hive TV put out. He went up and visited Michael Palmer, I think it was. It was Michael Palmer. It was a fairly recent video, and Michael is talking about they've done some studies and testing on kind of hitting on what you said, Greg, the protein source, the pollen. Like they found that a lot of the bees that were in locations where there were a lot of crop management close to their hives, they were finding high incidences of some of those chemicals in the pollen that the bees are bringing back.
Mm.
And so that is a concern. It's more of a slow thing. It could definitely weaken the colonies if there are poisons in the pollen. But I've never, my bees have been. I live in a farming area. Like we have row cropping all around us, and many of my locations are close to cotton and peanuts and corn and all that kind of stuff. And my bees seem to thrive for the most part. I did have some issues with bees at watermelon fields. I've kind of quit doing the watermelon pollination, at least for now, because it seemed like they just kind of struggled a little bit. They did okay, but they just seem to not be as strong as other bees that were not close to the watermelon fields. And so I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I don't think that, like you said, Greg, I don't think that we should blame all bee death on pesticides and fungicides and the things that the farmers are spraying. That is not, I mean, to me, that's trying to place blame, like you said, on somebody else when it may just be that, for whatever reason, the bees were weak. It may have been mites. It may have been beetles. It may have been the beekeeper. It may have been all kinds of issues. They may have got robbed out for whatever reason. The queen might have failed. And so we got to be a little slow to blame our failures on somebody else. But it does sound to me, Katerna's Corner, like you definitely had some sort of an event. I don't know what it was, but it kind of sounds like if they all happen within a week,
That's the hard part. It's
it's
easier
hard to know.
for
It is
us,
hard to
right?
know.
We can eventually say, okay, this loss is because of us. Here's the reasons why, and now here's the plan moving forward. Like that is ideal. Unfortunately, for Deterrence Corner, maybe they're out in an area where they are surrounded by large ag, and they are in a spray cycle, right? And their bees just getting pummeled with that. Here's one thing I would think about though. It's not going to help. It's not going to resurrect your dead bees. But we had just had John Turpin out from Strong Microbials not too long ago, and while we've used regular Pro DFM, I think there's an opportunity for you, Coturnix Corner, to take a look at the Strong Microbials P801 line of product because it is specifically designed to help offset that exposure to chemical, pesticide, fungicide, and things like that inside of the colonies. So definitely check out Strong Microbials P801. We have used strong microbials now for 2 years, and I really do see a difference with it. Not so much that our bees are constantly getting into toxic gick or that our bees are unhealthy, but I think the not only the lactobacillus but the other strains, the bacillus strains, I think it enhances and it builds some resiliency within the gut biome of the honeybee, that no matter what the stressor is, I really do feel like I'm seeing gains, that they're able to kind of buffer. A lot of it is me. A lot of it is external type things too, weather, dearth, things like that. I just think if, like us, if our gut biome is right, if our body can function, it can communicate, then I think it's a little bit more rugged and more resilient when there are stressors. So Koternik's Corner, take a look at that P801 from Strong Microbials, and if you need any more information, we can put you in touch with John Turpin, and he can definitely shine some more light on that. But I'm sorry you had that loss. That's terrible.
Yeah, that is terrible. I do believe too, Greg, and actually I have some of that product. I used it some earlier in the year. I probably right now, I guess, with all the stressors out there, it's a good time to use that, and when the bees are stressed out, to go ahead and hit all my colonies with it. I know they say initially when you treat it to use it once a week, and then throughout the year go once a month. And I've kind of fallen back on that. It's really easy. You just crack the lid and sprinkle some in there. It's not hard to do at all. And they've got it really an application that's very simple.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say, or if I'm allowed to say this, but if I get in trouble, well, I'll take the heat for it. We've been trialing a new product from Strong Microbials for a little while now, and it's a fondant that they actually have the Pro DFM mix within. And what's nice about that is we can put one of those fondant patties on top of a colony and have a slow release of that, so it can be extended over the course of a week, and then them kind of inoculate the colony with it, rather than in the past what we would do is put it in the air trigger sprayer and go into the front colony and blast the air with it on the dispenser, and it blasts a cloud of DFM inside of the colony. That worked out great too, but I really like the fondant approach, because the bees are going to they're going to take the carbohydrate anyways, and they're going to directly consume the probiotic, rather than you could say that they're cleaning it, they're removing it, they're this or that, but getting it into an ingestible form, I think, is a big deal.
Yeah, here's a comment. Carol McCarthy says, they sprayed the fields in the wind today. My bees seem to be fine for now, but our entire house reeks of chemicals so that you can taste it. Yeah. I mean, it's when you live in the country, like around here, if the wind's blowing a certain way, and if they have if they apply that, especially if it's like crop dusters, flying over you, I mean, you're just going to get, it's just going to happen. You're going to get some of that mist, especially if your bees are really close to a field. But I would like to say one thing that, and I kind of caution folks on here. I see a lot of comments, in the Facebook forums and pages about folks who have bees, like in a neighborhood. They've got a couple of hives and they live in a neighborhood, and they see their neighbor next door, a couple of houses down, spraying their lawn for weeds, and they get all upset about it. Is it going to hurt my bees? Is it going to kill my bees? Should I contact whatever, control? I'm like, look, technically for the bees, this is my opinion, to have a negative benefit from any type of spray or chemical is they have to have exposure to it, meaning typically fly through it, typically, as far as like an immediate result. My strongest colonies, many of them are right here in my backyard. And I am in a neighborhood where people have lawns, they have manicured lawns, they spray, they have gardens. I mean, I know there's stuff going around. They hire people to come in and spray their yards with all kinds of stuff to keep the weeds down and the pests down. And my bees have been pretty darn healthy, that I've had here at my house over the years. And so, I really think that so many times, Greg, like you mentioned at the beginning of this question or this comment, I think so many times people want to quickly blame the pesticides, the farmers, the neighbor, or just they get really worried about it. And I frankly just never, living right here in this neighborhood with spray all around me and people treating their lawns and everything, I never had really any significant issues. A few dead drones or a few dead bees in front of colonies occasionally, but no great big colony loss. that I had any inkling at all was a result of sprays or pesticides. Really, for that to happen, you just have to see great big piles of bees in front of the hive, and bees, you can tell when they've been poisoned. They're flailing around. They're just have this. It is a painful, slow death for them, I think, but it's just very rare. It can happen, but I think it's more rare than what people want to
More
see.
rare. When it does happen, though, it's still heartbreaking. I
It's
don't know if
awful. Yeah,
you
it's
remember
awful.
the video. Actually, it was the bugs in a box video, and the video opens with a sequence of a train and pans over to Tennessee Tim, and we're talking about all those things. That train is literally just across from the homestead there, and they suffer a tremendous loss. I think he lost 20 colonies one year, right after the railroad sprayed. They're spraying on both sides of the tracks for chemical weed control. And the unfortunate thing about it, and I don't think Tim would mind that I would say it here because he's said it a couple times, and if he minds, Tim, I apologize for telling your story, but the story goes something like, the railroad sprayed, they all their bees were dead, and the railroad's response was, prove that it was us, that we did it. You get into a certain situation there where you're what it would take to fight that kind of a battle. Um, the effort spent to fight that battle might be better spent moving something else in a positive direction that can actually make an impact. I won't go down this road because I'll get fired up. But if we want to enjoy the independence and freedom that we do have in this country, at some point in time, we do, whether we agree or not, have to respect everyone's right, or at least the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What that means for your neighbor, they might be finding complete value, joy, and happiness in life by having a manicured golf course back lawn, right? That's not for you or me, because we want the dandelions and we want this and we want that for our bees, and we see the value in that. But for other folks, no matter how much over the fence bantering, or snickering or anything is going to change that, and maybe not even all the free honey in the world is going to change that. Sure, can you go and have that conversation where it's like, hey, would you mind? I see that you're spraying weeds, and I get it. Is it possible you could do it at like dusk or dawn? And here's the reasons why. And if they still won't, we can't control that. You can't spend your life in your beekeeping career worrying about all the things that you can't control. But what you can do is worry about what you do have an influence over. Making sure that our bees are as healthy as they possibly can be. Try to have some kind of a plan, buffer in place where if we do have loss, here's how we rebound. And sometimes, no matter what you do, you just lose. And it's sad and it's unfortunate. But like William Kurtz, Grumpy Bill's Bee says, you got to pick your battles with these things. If your goal in life is to use your bees as a fight against Monsanto or Bayer or Roundup or any, good luck, right? Because you don't have the pocketbooks to do that. But what you can do is spread awareness, and you can try to make that turn it into a positive. So in this situations here, it's easy to blame Big Ag. It's easy to blame things that make it harder for us to keep bees. But we also can't let what we're doing with our bees and the joy and the happiness that we have from that. We can't actually. We don't want to get in a situation where we're pitted against one another, with difference of opinions because of that. So we have to. I could go on all night, but I think you get the gist.
Yeah. Well, we're getting kind of towards that 2 hour mark. There's a couple more comments and questions maybe we could address before we wrap it up, Greg. Here's one kind of to close out this topic. This may go along with the pollen thing, if this is indeed kind of what the bees are doing. The guard bee, I have a hive that the guard bees were making the foragers dump the pollen on the porch. I tasted it and it burned my mouth when I left it. When I left the yard, I saw a neighbor spraying their yard. So, I mean, the bees are pretty, they're pretty able to also cotton land honey. Apiary here says he's farmed cotton and peanuts all around my bees yard, around my bee yard, and have never had an issue. That's been my experience. I've had bees literally. You saw how close my bees were to cotton last year, Greg, when you were down here, about 20 feet away, 30 feet away. and they did fine. And I know they were spraying stuff out there occasionally. Although some of I believe some of the strains of cotton and peanuts, different products now, different crops, don't require as much spraying, but they
Well, I
obviously
think
still have to
that's
do
actually
some.
where a lot of the problems are coming from because the built-in pesticide built into the genetic material of
Oh,
the plant, it's when that it dries out, goes to stalk, and then gets harvested. Those dust clouds from that, I think, are also
oh, okay.
preventing or posing. I'll say maybe posing some challenges, but at the end of the day, I mean, what can we RBs if RBs wanted to, we as you come up and down our road on either side of the valley and the ridge where there are flat-ish spots,
Mhm.
benches and terraces and such, we've got corn and soy and rye and wheat. Of course, we don't have cotton or peanuts, but this is going this is a just a, I don't, this could go on for all night. I would be more worried. This is going to sound ridiculous, and I hope you don't get any hate mail, Bruce. But if you
Yeah.
do, send it to Bruce, not me. Because we're on Bruce's channel tonight. It's only fair. I would be more. You know what would be more concerning for me having an apiary next to? Would you? Let me ask you, Bruce. What would be the most devastating crop in your mind having your bees next to? Would you rather be next to an apple orchard, or would you rather would you rather be next to a corn or soy field?
Apple orchard probably because they're spraying those blooms actively. Peaches, same way, I
Yeah,
would say.
it's a massive misconception that the healthiest place for, oh, I want to have my bees at a blueberry orchard. Oh my God, that's like well probably the worst. I would much rather have my bees parked next to corn or soy than I 100% would blueberries or apples or almonds, obviously, for sure.
Yeah.
But that's part of the game.
Yeah. One more question, Greg. I think this will be getting back to queens a little bit, and you're the pro on this. Is there Bracken Barker says, is there an ideal distance that mating nukes with queen cell splits should be away from the main production yards?
The terrible answer to this, which is unfulfilling, is it depends. Right now, we've got a lot of our, how do I say that? We are set up in a way where we intentionally do have large colonies that are pumping out drones within a half a mile of where we're shooting off our queens to get mated. Where our queens are shooting off to get mated are in conservative sized colonies. There's a risk to that. Today we went through and the ones where we had a cell maybe didn't take, or for whatever reason they're those are the ones that can get robbed out, can get slimed out, and can be a problem. Ideally, if you think about what's going on there, if there's so much different information where have your mating nukes right in your main production yard, all the way to your mating nukes need to be 2 or 3 miles away. Either way, if you really think about it, this is going to sound backwards, but either way you think about that, your mating nukes are in flight range of your production yards. Okay. Except for if the only way that they're not is if your mating nukes are not close to production yards. But that's really not ever the case because your mating nukes are in proximity for a drone congregation area, which are typically pretty sizable size colonies. So at any point in time, no matter where you're shooting queens up to get mated, they are within flight range of colonies that are bigger. The question becomes, how big do these colonies have to be before these smaller ones are at a risk? When you start diving into that, that gets uncomfortable and squeamish quick because technically, if you have a 2 or a 3 frame mating nuke, anything that's a 3 or a 4 frame mating nuke is stronger and could rob that one out. So I don't know that there is a good distance. In my mind, you can consider it backwards or contrary. What I see is our bees lift off and they go fly out and they come back home. So in my area, like right now, for instance, we've got several hundred mating nukes right next to 40, 50, 60 production colonies within 200 yards. And then so far, it's not a problem. Very late in the year, we know we can't have a handful of bees in a queen cell anywhere. um, anywhere on any of this on the sites, because those are problematic. So what is the ideal distance that mating nukes with queen cell splits should be away from the main production yards? It depends on how large your main production yards are, and also the size of those production colonies. I think that makes a bigger difference as to how far they are, because we can be in the same yard and be okay most of the time too.
Yeah, one of the theories that I've heard, and as you want your because the drones, I'm not sure even what the theory is, but the drones will fly further than the queens, or vice, maybe the queens fly further than the drones, is to have your mating nukes ideally in the middle of a spoke shaped, with your production yards or your drone producing yards X distance away, like a half a mile. You got 4 or 5 different spokes sticking out where if those queens leave, they have a much greater chance of mating with your drones. You flood the area with your drones. And so I think that's another issue that people wonder about, is do they actually mate with drones from your own? I don't know. I personally am not sure. I believe that they don't mate with drones from the same yard. I do believe they probably don't mate with drones from the same hive, but I believe there's some way that maybe they can sense that it's, is a drone from a different, a colony. But I think that, I'm not sure how that all works. Greg, you have your farm set up in a way where you kind of maybe understand how the drones congregate better. I think you do. Obviously, if you can if you can have more hives in different areas producing drones all around your bees, you're going to have more chance that your bees are going to mate with drones that are desirable. But really, you can't control, I don't think, exactly who they're going to mate with. But like in your area, you flooded your area with your bees and bees that you want to be there. And so obviously your queens don't have much of a choice, because
Right.
they're gonna run into your drones wherever they go, because you've got enough acreage and enough land where you can spread them out a little bit. What are your thoughts about that? I guess the question I would have to kind of piggyback on that is, if I'm a sideliner beekeeper with 50 colonies or 40 colonies, or even I live in downtown, I can't set colonies all around my neighborhood, or a half mile to a mile or 2 miles away. So am I going to be successful mating queens if I have a small queen operation, even if I don't have multiple bee yards? I think that's how some people get intimidated, is they think, man, I can't do that. I don't have all this land where I can put, my experience has been, they get mated somehow. There are bees out there they're mating with, and hopefully some of them are the bees I want them to. But there's so many feral colonies around here, it's really not an issue. So what are your thoughts about that? Both all levels of beekeeping, as far as the distance the queens fly and the drones, the principle behind all that.
This is a really fun topic, and when you start to dive into this, I think you have what science supposedly tells you about what the bees are supposed to do, and then we have what we see the bees do. And sometimes those two are polar opposites. Sometimes what we understand from our end, we see it, we don't have quite the full explanation, and then we can kind of see everything full picture. What I can tell you is, when we started our bee business literally out of the side yard of the homestead, where we raised all of our colonies right here on the homestead, and we raised 110 nukes and as many queens as we could make, and they were all in the same yard. And I'm talking 4 rows of bees jammed in there as tight as they could possibly go. And you know what we always found is our queens always got mated, and they got mated very well. Later, it's a long story. I think we captured a little snippet of that with Jason Crook. And so I'll let him finish telling that story, and we'll circle back to tighten up any of the details. But we were in a situation where I think we have to be comfortable as beekeepers, as just accepting that we can only do so much. And as if we're doing our best, then let's go for that. It's one thing to be able to strive for excellence, but it's one thing to obsess for the absolute pinnacle of what we think what we are or what we should be doing is, because a lot of times we don't even understand what that's like. In this current situation, going back to the homestead bee yard, there was nothing fancy, but we didn't understand it then. We understand it now, and we've alluded to it with Lisa and the video we did with her, and also with Jason. is we actually have a pretty healthy feral population of bees in our area. It's hard to explain why that is, but we're out kind of in the middle of nowhere, with a lot of forest land, ravines, hills, hollers. The topography is absolutely perfect, for there to be a lot of colonies, and that is what our initial backbone of our genetics came from. We're actually feral colonies, and we tell more about that story, a little bit later or in some other videos. So I wouldn't get too hung up on how far that they need to be. When you get to a situation where it really starts to matter is when you're making 50, 75, 100 queens a week. And it matters, any drop off in queen performance or mating opportunities. At that point in time, I think it's worth trying to do the most optimal situation. So we went from literally side yard beekeeping, with no DCAs, no drone yards set out anywhere, just the best that we could do, to where today, if God said, Greg, I want you to draw up a sketch and a blueprint of your most perfect, ideal a queen breeding scenario, I would have done this and this and this and that, and I would have handed it to God, and God would have laughed and said, how about this? And that how about this is what God gave us with this new farm. And we're able to raise bees in a way where we can set drone yards a half a mile in all directions and still be on the farmland. That's a big deal because we can control every aspect of that. So what I can tell you now is our queen quality has increased, not only with continued work on genetics, our genetic lines, the breeder queens that we've brought in to blend with that, but the mating opportunities that our queens have, I think, are unlike just about anywhere else, because we can control all these parameters, and that's a whole conversation for a different night on how we do that, how we tweak those systems for the highest amount of gain as far as drone saturation, queen mating, what that efficiency and efficacy actually looks like. So don't sweat the big picture details. Tighten up what you're doing, and even in your own yard, there are things that you can do to pump out lots and lots of drones. And maybe we should talk about that another night, Bruce, because I could go on all night.
Yeah, maybe we'll still do our interview one of these days where we talk more about queens and splits and things like that.
We'll have to get around to that, won't we? Yeah.
Maybe we can do that later in the year when everybody's not quite so busy. But anyway, we appreciate everyone coming on tonight. Next week, Greg, I believe it's the stream team is scheduled to be on your channel. If we can work that out, hopefully it'll work out good and we can get back in a groove here. It's just been such a busy time. And what I'd like to do now, Greg, is just give a few final thoughts, and then we'll let you close it out. How's that sound?
Sounds good, buddy.
But anyway, we appreciate everyone coming on tonight. We've had a really good, I think, a really good chat, Greg. It's been real informative and it's been fun, and we've had a lot of great interaction in the comment section. We appreciate everyone. If we missed your question, I apologize. The comments come in and we're trying to talk, and when Brian's not here capturing everything, it's kind of hard sometimes to address everything. But one thing I will mention, sometimes those questions are easier to see if you attach them to a super chat or super sticker. But either way, we just appreciate you coming in here and participating in the chat. And I'm just going to keep rocking and rolling. July and maybe into August, depending on how things go, is going to be a big month for me. I really do want to get this queen situation figured out. I think about all my yards, most of them are much better than they were last year. The Ozark bees still need some work. And so we're going to really try it. And it could have to do with the environment a little bit. I don't know up there, but we're going to figure some things out. And so that's kind of where I'm going with everything. I mentioned a little bit last week in the chat that as far as frequency of my videos, for a while this spring, I was just trying to do a video on everything I was doing in the bee yard. And it just got to where I was extremely burnt out. It seemed like the channel wasn't growing that much faster. It still kind of has a steady growth. And I kind of got into the game of every time I want to watch, I post a video, I want to watch the stats and just, try to grow my channel that way. But I'm hoping to create, a little better content as we go along and show you things that are interesting, but I'm not going to probably do the videos quite as frequently of every little thing I'm doing. It's just a lot of work to do that. And so I'm still going to be producing videos, and hopefully the quality is going to continue to get a little better, but it's not going to be maybe quite as frequently. So I hope you'll forgive me for that and continue to watch. But I just can't pump out 2-3 videos a week. That's just very difficult for me to do, and to keep my sanity and keep the bees alive. My number one goal in the next few months is to become a better beekeeper. And that's going to be my priority. It always has been, but I'm going to really focus on that. And if I can develop some and improve some skills, maybe I can share more of that with you in the future. So it's going to be less of showing every video of everything I try, and more of, hey, I've tried this and now this works. I'm going to show you this technique, and kind of a little bit of that kind of thing. And so it's going to maybe shift a little bit what I'm doing, but expect to have videos coming, maybe just not quite as many or as frequently. Greg, why don't you give us some final thoughts and bring it on home for us?
Well, it was good to be all together again. I'm sorry it's taken so long to get us all back, but it's a challenge when we're all out here, not just walking or not just talking the talk, but trying to walk it out. And when we're walking it out, and bees are a part of our life in a way to where, not that it's consuming us, but when there's a plan for us, and we're doing our best to put one foot out in front of the other. It's tough. It ain't easy. It's painful. It hurts. You're stretching out a lot. You're uncomfortable. But that's I feel like the plan that God has out for us, and so we're doing what we can to kind of fulfill that. So there's going to be times where we can't do all the things that we want to do, because there is the work that's set out in front of us to do. And I'm with you, Bruce. I absolutely, no one probably feels like they know it or recognize it anymore. But one of the things that I absolutely love to do is to be able to sit down and edit and put together and tell a story with audio and with different types of video reels and things things that we're doing here on the farm. I love to do that. I absolutely love to do it, and I feel like there's always an important message that we can help share and put out there with a lot of those things. The challenge is having the time to actually do that, and it was hard for me to say, I have to prioritize where I'm spending my time. I'm still so young. One thing, and I'm only 41, but one thing that's really hit me hard about 40 and 41 is that, I've got about 20 good years left where I feel like I'm physically, I'm going to be at least semi in control, or be able to do what I want to do. And at a certain point, I'm going to have to get good with accepting what I can do and what I can't do. So being mindful that I have a biological clock of I don't want to say stoutness, but of ability, knowing that I'm trying to be very mindful and very respectful of the time that God has given me on earth. And what that means a lot of times is making those tough calls, and I can't go do this thing that I want to do, and I can't go spend time here doing this thing because this, and this, and this is where I'm called to do certain things. So because of that, we don't have very many videos that are coming out anymore, other than, thank God we have the live streams, kind of keeping our channel, up to date. I wish we could do a lot more and get a lot more videos out, and maybe there'll be a way that we can do that in the future. But for right now, I want folks just to remember and don't beat yourself up if you're not able to do all those things that you want to do. Life is not a race. You're on a path, and just you have to do what you feel called to do, what's on your heart, and do the best you can. And sometimes that's not even, like we talked about. Bruce wants to put out 3 videos a week if he can. But there's a consequence for that. I'd like to get out 1 video a week. Shoot, at this point, I'd like to get out 1 nicely edited video a month. But that's just not where our time and talents are focused. It's on growing this business, the brick and mortar, working the bees, and it's an absolute honor to be able to share at whatever capacity we can with Bruce and Brian and all the folks that tune in every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. on all of our channels. You guys are awesome and make all this work and happen, and we really appreciate you guys. What Bruce and Brian and we don't want you guys to think that just because we can't get together or our life gets busy and we can't produce all the content that we want, it is in no way a reflection of our passion to do this. It's just where our priorities are. And I know you, as beekeepers, you guys all get that. I could go on all night, Bruce. But I just want everyone to know how much we appreciate them. We love having you a part of this community. It feels more like a family. Really, you get to see so many folks every week tuning in, kind of engaging, and we really love that. So I'm going to thank everyone for their not only participation but their engagement within this community. You guys make this thing awesome. Bruce, as we kind of move forward through the next week and the rest of this beekeeping season, it's tough. This is where you really have to dig in. This is where you're going to have to find somewhere deep inside where you can just dig in and make things happen. When you've got heat indexes of 110 degrees and you've got honey to pull, right? Man, wouldn't that be nice to have an ice cold lemonade or iced tea or water and just be in air conditioning and just, well, you know what? If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And God has called us all as beekeepers to do this work. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But here you are. You're the one that are the stewards of these colonies. This is the time of year, historically, for me personally, where it is easy to start to slip just a little bit and start to get a little bit complacent and let the fatigue and the exhaustion and the and even being burned out start making decisions for you and those colonies that are going to affect those bees going into winter, and more importantly, those bees for you coming out of the spring. So try to do something to snap out of that, get grounded, decompress, stay hydrated, make sure you're eating, spend time praying, meditating, figuring out what is the next step. Think these things through. This is the time of year where if the wheels are going to start falling off the bus, it's going to start happening right now. Just be mindful of that. Do the best that you can. And I really do. I know I say it a lot. And if you are offended by what we call the gods per minute, the GPMs, no apologies. But I do feel like that God has called a lot of us to beekeeping. And it's not just about the bees. Bees are the conduit to the people. And so it's important, I think, to do the best we can, not just for the bees, but for the people that we're in these relationships with. So I'm looking forward to the next stream team. Bruce, it's going to be on our channel next. What we're going to talk about, who knows? But I'm sure it'll be fun. It'll be nitty gritty and right from the heart. I think that's what makes what we do special. We're not trying to be anything other than ourselves. We're comfortable in our own skin, and we can share our experience. And our folks listening and participating can do the same thing. And I think that's what makes this, so special. There's not a lot really, I think, left to say. But Bruce, I appreciate you being on tonight, and Brian, it was great having us all together. Looking forward to the next Stream Team Beekeeping Chat Wednesday night, 8 p.m. on the Nature's Image Farm YouTube channel. I do want to thank. We get a lot of calls every week. I spent some time today talking with J.W. Irwin, and what a fun guy to talk to. And it reminds me, I just want to throw this last little teaser out there. Bruce, Brian, and I should probably whisper this. We're working on trying to put together a Stream Team field day here at Nature's Image Farm. We're going to try to get these details worked out with enough notice that Bruce can get up here and Brian and everybody else. But it's going to kind of be just a little between us and our listeners kind of a thing. So be on the lookout for more information on that. We're going to work out those details and try to get something put together. I think it'd be a lot of fun to have Bruce and Brian and me here at the farm and kind of just sharing beekeeping face to face with a lot of our folks and listeners. So keep an eye out for that. It's sort of top secret. It's not going to be a big public thing. It's going to be a private listener kind of a thing. So we're going to work to make that happen. So anyways, you guys are awesome. We appreciate you. As always, I want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change that you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.